Like you said, a lot of those are, a lot of these can also be like autoimmune related. So kind of related to the immune response. And, 70% of our immune system is in the gut. That's a huge number, 70%. It's insane. So, really thinking about, we really need to harbor and cater to a healthy gut in order to have a healthy immune system. Yeah, so we know that those first kind of 3 years of life are so important for generating the gut microbiome. And then we do see that in adulthood, the microbiome, even with like different interventions, it will still very largely resemble kind of how your gut microbiome was shaped in those first 3 years of life. We did, in fact, find we exposed saliva to some of the top three food preservatives. And we did find that even within 10 minutes of exposure, we altered the abundance of bacteria, the relative abundance of bacteria. The bacteria were decreased from about 25 to 50%. I was reading this infographic and they had this statistic that majority of patients with IBS would be willing to trade 10 to 15 years of their life expectancy for resolving symptoms tomorrow. And that, again, one of these reasons why I got so passionate about this.
Hey, before we dive in, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. It means so much to me. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and join us on this journey. You see, we created BioBelly because gut health changed everything for me and the people I love. I watched my best friend Ankit battle ulcerative colitis and my aunt struggle with IBS-C, and seeing their pain showed me how broken the system really is. There's so much confusion out there and so little care that feels personal or hopeful. BioBelly exists to change just that, with science you can trust, education that empowers you, and solutions that actually help. So if you believe in making gut health simple, compassionate, and effective, I'd love for you to subscribe and be part of this movement with us. And for little daily gut health tips and encouragement, you can always find me on TikTok at the Gut Guy. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the BioBelly Show. Today, I'm joined by someone truly special, Rachael Kent Frias. Rachael is a registered dietitian nutritionist born and raised in Maui, Hawaii, and what makes her work stand out is her deep focus on integrative, gut-centered care. She's not only worked as a clinical dietitian at the Maui Memorial Medical Center, but she's also done published research on how food preservatives impact the mouth microbiome, which sparked her passion for understanding how food and lifestyle affect our gut. Along with that, she specializes in IBS, SIBO, pediatric gut health, gluten-free living, and even the gut hormone axis, which connects digestion to things like stress, energy, and hormones. What I admire most about Rachael is her plant-forward, whole person approach, blending nutrition, lifestyle, and balance to truly help people heal. Rachael, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to dive into your story and wisdom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rachael, real quick, it's so cool. You're from Maui and you've built such a unique path as a gut focused dietitian. Can you take us back to what first pulled you into gut health?
Sure, absolutely. It's funny. I think, from a really young age, I kind of thought about nutrition, perhaps, maybe not necessarily differently, but I think all through my young childhood, I kind of paid attention to nutrition in terms of what I versus like other people were eating. I remember this experience in class. I think it was like the first grade or something where we had to draw our favorite foods on like a little cardboard cutout of a t-shirt on like one of the sleeves. And when they were all hung up in the classroom, everyone was asking me what my favorite foods were. And it's because I had drawn tofu and broccoli, which was like a first grade rendition of tofu and broccoli. And while everyone else's was like pizza and ice cream. And I just significantly remember that moment as just, oh, like food is different for everyone. Nutrition, I probably didn't know the word nutrition at that time, but food was really different for everyone and everyone's choices really vary. And so I've always kind of had this interest behind like, what are those differences? What can they mean? What do they mean culturally? And kind of the different aspects to that. So I've always really been interested kind of in that from a younger age. I would say as I got older, I didn't necessarily pursue a career in nutrition. I was always really interested in it, but it seemed somewhat out of reach for me. I ended up pursuing like a degree in business, but just really nutrition was really just kept pulling at me. And I really just kind of felt that passion. And I would find that all of these like research articles and things that I would write during my time in college, I would always pick the topic of nutrition. It would always come back to nutrition. So I finally just, you know what, I think we should do this, and delved into a degree in dietetics. And it was there, like you mentioned, at my local college here. I was approached by one of our professors to join her research team on researching the effects of food preservatives on the mouth microbiome, so the oral microbiome, which of course is the kind of first step in intro to the entire gut microbiome. And that just opened my eye up to like the minuscule aspects of nutrition and digestion, and how, the gut is really both figuratively and literally the center of our whole body and health. So I think that really opened up my eyes to this different aspect of nutrition that is becoming more talked about today, absolutely. But
Right.
it's still really not explored as much as it should be, and so that was really different. And then during my dietetic internship, I interned with Married to Health, and kind of following the practice with Dahlia and James, and really getting this exposure to kind of like
Mhm.
gut disorders and to individuals with IBS or IBD, or just different, issues just overall with digestion. And I was really amazed, and my eyes were really wide open to how prevalent it is, just how many people this does really affect, and how significantly it really affects their lives. These, discomforts and signs and symptoms that are, pain and bloating, these are things that are happening on a daily basis, weekly basis, hourly basis. And I just really wanted to delve into that and kind of help people with those struggles.
Love it, love it. And speaking of those struggles, Rachel, you mentioned IBS. Most people confuse IBS and SIBO. How do you see the difference, and what's often missed in care?
Sure, it's a great question, and they are really intertwined. So, SIBO can be a cause of IBS. So, because of the symptoms that SIBO do cause, you can fall under the realm of IBS. So, they are really intertwined in that way. But if you have IBS, you don't necessarily have SIBO. So, IBS is
Okay.
kind of like, really prevalent pain, discomfort, changes in bowel movements. There are three different types of whether it's predominantly diarrhea, predominantly constipation, or kind of a mix of the two. Similarly, if you have SIBO, depending on the different types of microbes responsible for the overgrowth, SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So just as it sounds, you do have an overabundance of bacteria in your small intestine. It's we have gut microbes throughout our entire digestive tract, so from gum to bum, so that includes the small intestine, though we want the vast majority of those microbes to be in the colon, so down in the large intestine. So when there's an overabundance and an overgrowth of bacteria within the small bowel or small intestine, that's when we're seeing this, cases of SIBO. And depending on the type of bacteria or archaea responsible for that overgrowth, you can experience perhaps constipation more predominant, or diarrhea. So they are really similar. And I would say, like, all cases of SIBO are IBS, but not all cases of IBS are necessarily SIBO.
Got it, got it. And if we could play out a scenario here, if a patient does come to you with chronic bloating, let's say, how do you start peeling back the layers of trying to diagnose what that issue could be?
Yeah. So First, what we like to do is really delve into a history. So, what we refer to as
Okay.
like your health story. So, really, through from birth to the current time that I'm seeing you, just your entire history throughout life to really get a clear picture of what could be contributing to this bloating, as you mentioned, or other signs and symptoms that you're experiencing today. Was there a special, or not necessarily special, but a significant event that seemed to kind of tip off the symptoms? For example, food poisoning can be a significant cause of both IBS and SIBO. Did you go
Right.
on a, vacation and you got food poisoning and a few months later all of these symptoms started and before that there really was no issue? So that could be one example. Or was this something that's been chronic through life? Do you remember? I have many, many patients who will say, I just remember all throughout childhood, I always had kind of a touchy stomach. I was always constipated. I always had kind of like a nervous stomach. So was this something from, that has been kind of building up for a long period of time? So that's kind of the first step, is really piecing together all the things that could be contributing to what you're experiencing today to help us uncover what that root cause of what brings you to our appointment, what that could be.
Got it, got it. Because, the more I learn about it, Rachel, the more I see how you were mentioning major events in life. But along with like food sensitivity related events, sometimes it's also like a trauma or a very stressful event that has somehow manifested as gut issues. I wanted to, hear a little bit, learn a little bit about your experience with patients with that specific related trauma, if it was a mental or stressful incident and that induce those gut issues? How do we navigate those situations?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Something that I am also particularly interested in as well, because of kind of like our fast paced society today, even outside of like large traumas. And I think like chronic stress or like chronic kind of like trauma in that way. A lot of patients will also kind of describe themselves as like type A personality, where are, they're placing their own stress on themselves kind of like through childhood or a certain point in life. And that can add to stress in that way too. So that kind of like stress layer, it can be related to trauma, but there are so many other things that can contribute to, a specific time of increased stress in life or even just this chronic stress in life. But identifying if that is at the root of some of your symptoms can be really important. And so that can be where we are kind of looking back in the timeline. Was there a certain point in your life where you did experience a trauma or life was particularly stressful for you at this time and that might have onset some of your symptoms? Sometimes patients will say, I started getting sick a lot after that. Maybe it's not even GI symptoms. Maybe we're just seeing the impact of stress on the immune system, that you would frequently get sick. And then often that can also be accompanied by antibiotics as well. So you're kind of like double compounded there with the stress and inflammation, and then your immune system is decreased. And then from there, you're more prone to infection. Then you take antibiotics, and then that's further affecting the gut microbiome, and things can really start to spiral. And especially, like I said, in kind of like long-term stressors, or depending on what perhaps that trauma and or stress was, if you're still in a current situation that's causing stress on top of that after that kind of initial event, we really start to see things really snowball. If there is a particular stressful or traumatic event that we can address, um, you know doing different methods or therapies to target that, whether that be like psychotherapy or, kind of other realms of addressing that
Right.
trauma, that can be really, really important, because the brain and body and therefore digestive system can be trained almost in a way to react to whatever stressors that might be tied to that original trauma. So it could be a place. It could be a place that you perhaps have to visit every day that you experience this trauma. And then so every time that you are in that particular place, your body and your digestive system is kind of reacting in the same way that it did when it experienced that initial stressor. So really getting at that trauma can be significantly important. Yeah, so it's a really great question. And if you have
Yeah.
any further
Well,
kind of questions on that area, it's really interesting one to talk about.
100%. Yeah, it's so interesting because along with this whole system of the mind, the gut, the digestive system, there's also a new component of hormones, right? I know you specialize in the gut hormone axis. Can you explain how our gut and hormones talk to each other?
Absolutely. So, where those hormones are really sending those signals and kind of give telling our brain and therefore thus the body what different mechanisms to either start, to stop, to keep going or not. So, regulating those signals is so important. With stress and kind of the adrenal glands, regulating cortisol can be so important with that. An increase in cortisol, which happens in times of stress and kind of back to chronic stress. So, if you are someone who is perhaps the type A personality or lives a really busy life and never kind of slows down, even if like that slowing down is sitting on the couch and scrolling on your phone, there's still like the brain is really active there and it can still be stressful. You could be watching stressful videos, the news is
Right,
really
right.
stressful. So, even sometimes in these moments where we think we're being calm, we're still kind of stimulating those stress responses and perhaps elevating the cortisol levels. And so, elevated cortisol can increase or decrease our insulin sensitivity, so increase our insulin resistance, and so keep our
Right.
blood glucose spiked. The responses to elevated cortisol can be decreasing the regeneration of the mucosal cells within our GI tract. It can impact our production of hydrochloric acid or HCl, which we need for digestion of proteins, also for the digestive enzymes to really kind of turn on. We need the appropriate pH balance, and HCl is really important in that. So, cortisol can downregulate that. It can decrease immunoglobulins that are responsible for kind of the first line of defense within the GI tract. So, another thing, like I said, contributing to perhaps to make you more prone to illnesses and sickness. I'm kind of really interested in like that cortisol and stress response and how it relates to the gut. And that is a really, kind of important hormone, and regulating the adrenal system is so important for gut health and digestion.
Yeah, because I really liked earlier you were mentioning the insulin resistance, right?
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm slowly starting to learn more and more about how the body works. I'm even reading a book called Gut by this I believe gastroenterologist called Julia Enders. Very interesting book. She kind of explains the gut and its connection to the body with a very first principles perspective. And one thing she did mention was insulin resistance, and she was mentioning how a lot of people don't notice it, but these major diseases that we do feel like are on an incline in terms of number of cases is like diabetes, Parkinson's, depression, even arthritis, osteoporosis. A lot of these are gut related. I wanted to get your thoughts on specifically issues like what is it that we're doing on a regular basis in terms of our lifestyle that is increasing our chance of or being diagnosed with these issues. Like what's going on in our gut specifically that might be manifesting as these major very commonly occurring diseases.
Yeah. Well, it's a really great point. Like you said, a lot of these can also be like autoimmune related. So kind
Right,
of
right, right.
related to the immune response. And 70% of our immune system is in the gut. That's a huge number. 70%. It's insane. So, really thinking about, we really need to harbor and cater to a healthy gut in order to have a healthy immune system. And this makes perfect sense if you think about it. I would say, maybe, aside from our skin, which is really strong, which is really directly exposed to the outside world, the next step is kind of like internally. Everything that we put into our mouth was taken from the outside world and then we're ingesting it. So we do need a really strong immune system there. And so, really catering, I would say, to your diet and thus your gut microbes is so important. I think the easiest thing to think about and kind of wrap your head around is really the amount of plants you are eating. So, definitely
Okay.
just increasing plant foods. We're increasing that way, we're getting a lot of fiber. We're getting, and not just amount of plant foods, but also variety of different plant foods. So we're getting different fibers, we're getting the different varieties of fibers, we're getting a wide range of different macronutrients, micronutrients, phytochemicals, and all through all the different colors in the foods as well. So really making sure we're getting a nutrient dense diet, which is going to cater to our body, but then also our gut microbes as well. Our gut microbes, they digest our fiber. We don't digest our dietary fiber. We can't break that down, but they still consume our dietary fiber, and they make short chain fatty acids, which are an energy source for our body. So our body uses these short chain fatty acids. It makes up about 10% of the entire host energy requirements. And then in relation to a healthy gut, the cells of the colon, so our colonocytes, again, that number 70% of their energy comes from these short chain fatty acids as well.
Wow.
So, again, that's alarming and or it's astonishing. And I think it's alarming
Astonishing.
that that we are also seeing this rise in colon cancer. And I think it makes a lot of sense that as we know people aren't consuming enough dietary fiber, if you think about that process, we really need to consume the dietary fiber so our gut microbes can consume the dietary fiber, and then they produce those short chain fatty acids, which is 70% of the energy for those colon cells. So if we're skipping that step, we're not getting enough fiber to our gut bacteria. They can't make all that energy for our colon cells. And that's just one example of where we really need to cater to this kind of middleman in the intestinal tract that can help provide things that we need to maintain our overall health as well.
Got it, got it. And speaking from, I remember earlier in the conversations you were talking about how you like to ask the patient kind of like their journey all the way from birth to now, like if there was any events going on. I was wondering because pediatric gut health is also a major topic nowadays, right? Because as parents, I personally, I don't have children, but I have nephews, and I see like my brothers, they're very even myself, like I want to make sure they're having the right foods and they're, optimizing their gut health for their overall long-term wellness. um what is the why is the early microbiome so important, and what are the best practices we can imbibe in our child's diet and lifestyle to cultivate the quote unquote perfect gut?
Yeah. So we know that those first kind of 3 years of life are so important for generating the gut microbiome. And then we do see that in adulthood, the microbiome, even with like different interventions, it will still very largely resemble kind of how your gut microbiome was shaped in those first 3 years of life. So it's so, so critical. That's really the cornerstone of your microbiome for the rest of your life. So if you think about 3 years, that's a really, really small percentage. So it
Wow.
can be really, really key to hone in on gut health in childhood, starting from, like I said, going back to birth, whether or not you were born via vaginal birth or via C-section. With a C-section, you skip going through the vaginal canal, which has an array of microbes. And so not only do you skip that, but you are then kind of born into this sterile environment. So right away, you
Mm,
just kind of didn't get those microbes planted, and then you got placed to where there were absolutely no microbes because they do a good job at making sure that everything's really sterile if you are having a birth in a hospital, for example. So that's really one step. If you do have a C-section, you can ask to do like a vaginal swab. Well, they will kind of swab the vaginal canal and just kind of swab that onto the baby as well. So just really plant those microbes. And then physical contact can be really important too, because we share microbes between people also. So, um, staying away from this idea that everything really needs to be as sterile as possible, because especially building up again that immune system, the I like to think of it as like practice. The immune system needs a little bit of practice of detecting what's kind
Right.
of like good, what's bad. So we need that exposure as much as possible. And then from there, like I said, it's still just like adults, we need to go back to the plant food. So trying to introduce plant foods, variety of plant foods and fibers in the diet from a really young age. And I know this can be difficult. Like you said, I'm the same. I don't have children myself, but I have a ton of nieces and nephews. And so I
Yeah.
see the wide range of kind of like nutrition across them, and also like eating habits and patterns, and how open they are to like trying different foods prepared in different ways. And I would say that can be one of the biggest things, is really just exposure, exposure, exposure. They find that it can take up to 20 times of exposing a child to the same food before they are even willing to try it, let alone then maybe even start to actually enjoy it. So it can be a difficult process, maybe, but just really being on top of that with continuing to expose your child to all these different kinds of foods, and really develop their palate for life as well. If they're able to learn to enjoy these different foods from a young age, that will really impact their health further out on in life. But we do want to start that variety of plant foods early on in the
Mm.
childhood.
Yeah, I feel like one of the, especially in my culture, as an Indian, a lot of when a child in the family is born, it's like we want to spoil them, right? And I remember, and I'm very guilty about it, but like when my oldest nephew Ikam, when he turned 2, we wanted to, give him a taste of cake and give him a taste of the sweet stuff, and it's like now with God's grace, he loves fruits and he loves, having he loves like, yeah, basically just fruits. But veggies, he has a very tough time with trying out different veggies like broccoli and lentils. Sometimes he has it through his mom, but it's personally a very uphill battle for me trying to figure out how I can get him to eat healthier food. One thing is, we are vegetarian as a family. And so, in terms of protein sources, there is already a bit of a narrower range of options. And so he's really just got lentils and cottage cheese and I guess some soya products and tofu, like and broccoli and tofu, like you were mentioning in the drawing.
Yeah.
So that's really all he has. But he doesn't really like either any of it. He only likes fruits, or if it's like a soy nugget, like if it's like Gardein, like so they have soy products,
Hmm.
but I feel like those are so processed and they have things in them like I was reading titanium dioxide. I was reading it in on the Gardein label, and for a part of me when I was putting his those nuggets in the air fryer, part of me was like, I don't feel this is good for him, you know. But sorry, I digress.
No,
I,
not
I
at all.
wanted to I wanted to ask you about preservatives because you've actually studied preservatives.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to know what's the real world takeaway for people who feel lost in all the food label noise.
Yeah, it's a good point. Back to kind of like the food preservatives, what we studied was the impact that food preservatives had on the gut microbes, like I said, in the mouth, which was such an interesting concept to me, because if you think about it, we're putting these food preservatives in our food to inhibit bacterial growth. So my
Right.
professor, the lead researcher of the research that we did, she was like, "Well, is it inhibiting the growth of the bacteria within our GI tract?" And we did in fact find we exposed saliva to the top, well, some of the top three food preservatives. And we did find that even within 10 minutes of exposure, we altered the abundance of bacteria, the relative abundance of bacteria. The bacteria were decreased from about 25 to 50%. And so this was just
Wow.
within 10 minutes, and this was just within the mouth. And that was just, we did test food preservatives at levels generally regarded as safe. So that would be like per serving per item. So this doesn't, speak to whether you're at a party and you're trying 5 to 10 different foods that perhaps maybe have those food preservatives in it. Maybe you're drinking some juices or wine that also have these food preservatives in it. And like I said, 10 minutes, especially at things like a party at a gathering where you're snacking on these foods or drinking those drinks for like hours at a time, you can be really impacting your gut microbes. So, with that said, like you said, kind of navigating all of these different labels, I Whole Foods is definitely kind of like the easiest thing to stick to because
Mm,
they haven't been processed, so not, they won't have any preservatives or anything else added to it. What I like to do, because this can be tricky, it's really difficult. Those food labels out there, they're really long. If you're speaking realistically, a lot of us are, eating a lot of packaged foods regardless, and some of them can be really healthy also.
no.
So it can be kind of a tricky thing to navigate. What I like to perhaps lean on is take a step back and look at your overall diet. How much of your overall diet is made up of those whole foods? So, if you are eating a frozen burrito for dinner, maybe make some broccoli and carrots and peas or salad, what have you, on the side. So, don't skip those whole foods. And so, you're not getting 100% of your diet coming from these things that are tied to perhaps those labels, and you're still focusing on what whole foods you are getting into your diet. Depending on where you're starting, I really do like 50% to 75% of your overall food intake. So just kind of like thinking about your plate, what percentage of your plate is coming from those whole food sources, and thinking about it that way. Um, and then you can start to kind of apply that to shopping, to when you are reading those labels. Look at the ingredients. Do you recognize those whole food pieces that are within that package or within the product? Are the perhaps additives lower down into those food labels, meaning that by weight they take up the smallest amount, and start maybe perhaps trying to pinpoint things from there. But I really think the overall arching important thing to pay attention to is your overall diet. So I know it can be so easy to kind of like take the take the really really close look of everything and pick at everything, but I find that that's really overwhelming, even personally, and then also just kind of navigating with patients how they can make changes. It becomes very overwhelming. So just take a step back and what percentage of your foods are coming from those whole foods, and just kind of start there.
Got it, got it. Yeah, for I think it's gonna be a work in progress for my nephews, but I really hope, it's I think really it's all about just making it fun, right? And I think it's really just about if and also leading by example. So if I am going
Yes.
out there and making sure my percentage of whole foods is in the top, hopefully 75 to 100%, hopefully that will inspire them to do the same.
Yeah,
Fingers
it's
crossed. It hasn't happened yet, but
yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, really, really the example is huge. Kids really they watch what you do, and that becomes what's normal for them. So they learn everything about the world through what they're seeing. So if they're seeing you always eating these foods and enjoying these foods, getting them kinds of hands-on, like preparing the foods with you, that can be really important too. Maybe you get some of those like kid-safe knives, for example,
right.
and really really just that exposure. I know for me personally, as my diet is plant-based, my nieces and nephews all the time, they're like, so you don't eat animals, you don't eat this, well what do you eat? And what it's interesting that I love answering those questions because they're curious about it, and I get to answer them with, well, take a look at my fridge, take a look at the pantry, like these are all the foods that you can still eat. And they go in there and they pick around and they try some foods, and sometimes they don't like them, but sometimes they find something that they do like. So really it is all about that exposure and about those conversations as well.
Love it, love it. And if I may, I was curious, why is it that this was it through like a personal decision, or was it just your family through which you decided to embark upon a plant-based lifestyle?
Yeah, for me, it happened very incrementally, very slowly. Again, kind of like back through my whole life. In childhood, my father doesn't eat like red meat and pork, so that to me had always already kind of been like, oh, well, it's not unusual for someone to kind of cut out certain animal products. My mom didn't follow that. My dad didn't necessarily make me try to follow it, but I think it kind of opened my eyes up to, like, again, these like different ways of eating. I was always kind of aware of that. And as is the story with many people, I watched a food documentary and I decided
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
yes, this is the truth for many. I watched a food documentary and switched to a vegetarian lifestyle. And when I did that, again, kind of back to plant foods, I realized how reliant we typically are on animal sources for not just protein, but just the bulk of our meals. So when I took out animal sources, just like my nieces and nephews, I had the same questions. Well, what do I eat? And I realized, and that's where I had to switch to eating more of these whole food plant foods. And that really, to me, it stuck, and it almost, eating vegetarian kind of just became this rule I did to follow to make sure I ate my plants. That kind of just like became what it was for me. It's like, okay, if I follow this diet, then I have to be more conscious at each meal. What am I eating? What, dietary fiber sources am I getting? What vegetables am I getting? What protein sources am I getting? That switch was really important for me, where I really started to evaluate my diet. And so that was really great. And then, this may not be true for everyone, but for me, I really started to kind of switch to fully plant based because of the, animal aspect of it, and kind of like veganism and
Mhm.
like animal cruelty and
Right.
sustainability
Absolutely.
aspect.
Yes.
I became like proud. Okay, at least I'm not contributing to that. And then I kind of slowly just started to substitute a lot of my like eggs and cheeses and things like that with plant based sources. And this really happened over like a few years for me, where I just stopped buying cheese, and I used substitutes, stopped buying sour cream and used substitutes. Same thing with like mayo, and just kind of like slowly made these switches. And then it was like, oh, you know what? I think I can totally cut out those other animal products. So for me, it was a very slow process. And I think that's what was best for me, because it can be a really big shift. And, this is also speaking as a dietitian. And I know that is not everyone's place as well. So if it was difficult for me, I understand it can be really difficult for everyone as well. And I don't even necessarily try to promote a plant based lifestyle
Right.
on others if that's not what you want to do. My approach is really that plant forward. I just want you to be eating your plants and be eating a lot of those plants.
Love it, love it. That I love it. Yeah, I think this is like a good 3-minute pep talk that I will share with my nephews, and I hope it, it inspires some change. Moving on though, Rachel. I wanted to share a little bit about why we started BioBelly to get a bit of your wisdom. So my family, I mentioned a bit about it beforehand, but on the record, my family, they struggled with ulcerative colitis and IBS. Specifically, my best friend Unkit struggled with ulcerative colitis, as I said, and my aunt struggled with IBS-C. And I saw how broken the system kind of is in specifically my aunt. She was, I guess, you could say, left with quick fixes that weren't giving her lasting healing, and it was something where she had to be more dependent on the laxative that she was given. For example, she has been taking like milk of magnesia for like 10 to 15 years, right? So what we're trying to do is focus deeply on gut health, specifically just gut health. And our approach, right? We want it to target root causes. So we have IBS, we have GERD, SIBO, Candida, and H. pylori, but we're also wanting to build into the gut brain axis, the gut skin axis, the gut heart axis, even the gut immune axis. And so we're trying to make first we're trying to make a line of supplements, but we realize that supplements is probably only 5 to 10% of the game, because as a person, if you have gut issues, supplements can only give you so much. It's really just, it's also the personalized care that you need, and that personalized care, advising you on which supplements to take, that's what really moves the needle in terms of long lasting health, which I feel Married to Health is doing so wonderfully. And one of our visions is to kind of be a part of that movement of kind of scaling personalized care, like in a national level. to so if anyone has issues, they can simply go online, hopefully be covered by insurance, and reach out to a gastroenterologist or an IBS dietitian. And the IBS dietitian and gastroenterologist that are treating them, they be connected, and they be on the same page. That's kind of the dream that I have. Is I was wondering, from your clinical perspective, what's missing in the gut supplement space right now, and where do patients get let down?
Yeah, it's a great question and it's a great vision. I think it's definitely something that is needed, especially with systems looking more at those root causes for patients. Um, like you say, even like IBS and SIBO, there are things that cause IBS and SIBO. Particularly with SIBO, patients can really get stuck in a cycle of eradicating SIBO, solving the overgrowth, and without addressing that root cause, whatever caused that SIBO is going to happen again, and you're going to get SIBO again. So even that can be recurring. And so really getting at that root cause is really important. And supplements can be really helpful for that. And I think what you touched on, even just having a practitioner advising on supplements, can be so integral to this process because of the vast variety of supplements that are available, the marketing that's out there. I think it's, similar to those food labels. It's just so difficult to decipher, for individuals to decipher what exactly is the supplement that they need themselves. And I think we were talking a bit earlier as well, where I think with the marketing, a lot of these supplements, they try to make it available and appeal to every single person. So they'll list like 20 to 30 symptoms. Like, are you experiencing all these different symptoms? And maybe someone's experiencing like five of them. So they take that supplement, but it might target a small portion of what it is that you need help with. But because that supplement is trying to cater to a million other people as well, you're also getting all of these other pieces of the puzzle that you might not need. So really that directed care of finding what the root cause of your symptoms are and having someone help you find what supplement you do need in that area can be helpful in regard to the supplement space.
Love it, love it. And specifically, if let's just say you were designing these supplements for your patients, would there be something you would want to see done differently?
It's a good question. I think maybe, I think again, kind of like simplicity that can help there.
Yeah.
Again, kind of like what exactly is your root cause, and let's just simply target that. And then, also perhaps maybe these different profiles of patients that you see, because they might be experiencing five of the 20 symptoms. So maybe a supplement that is catering to five of those 20 alone.
Okay.
Something like that perhaps could be really helpful.
Gotcha. Thank you, Rachel. And moving on, for someone living with IBS, what's the number one first step you'd recommend to bring hope and relief?
Yeah, that there are, solutions out there. There is, these symptoms they don't need to be your normal. I think it was the American College of Gastroenterology. I was reading this infographic, and they had this statistic that majority of patients with IBS would be willing to trade 10 to 15 years of their life expectancy for resolving symptoms tomorrow. And that, again, one of these reasons why I got so passionate about this, it's like, oh my gosh, that's no, we don't want you to reduce your life expectancy to find a solution to your symptoms. So, also majority of patients with IBS do not seek help from a medical professional. I think hopefully conversations like these and other conversations that are happening now, that we are talking about the digestive tract, we're talking about bowel habits, we're talking about gas and bloating, that the subject becomes not so taboo, because I do think that is a reason as to why people don't like to seek help. But first step, pay attention to whatever symptoms you are having and seek help, because we can, aim to find the root cause of what those symptoms are. If it's IBS, maybe it's SIBO. What is slowing down your gastric motility? Is it an imbalance of hormones? Is it chronic stress? Is it a combination of diet and lifestyle and all these other things? But really taking this integrative, whole body, whole mind approach to target those root causes to resolve or, at least control those symptoms so that you can, enjoy your life and not want to trade your life expectancy for that.
Love it, love it. This has been so incredible, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Before we close, though, where can people find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. So if you would like to see me for an appointment, you can visit marriedtohealth.com and book an appointment there. You can also find me on Instagram at a healthful Ray, RAE.RD.
Love it, love it. Thank you so, so much, Rachel. I feel like the main takeaway from this conversation is that healing is definitely within reach, and
Yes,
all it takes is the right guidance, the right team, and the right game plan. And yeah,
absolutely.
thank you
Uh,
so much for all your time, and I really hope we can talk again soon, where if hopefully, God willing, BioBelly is at a place where our dream is coming true and we are saving
yeah,
lives, just like Married to Health. Would love to talk then.
absolutely. I hope for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.